Okay, before we get into this review, I have to issue an apology to Vader vs. Obito. I'm ashamed to admit that after this matchup was announced following Stitch vs. Rocket, my first thought was, I hope this can do enough to differentiate itself from Obi-Wan vs. Kakashi. Clearly, this was a grievous error, and I wish to say I'm sorry for this severe and continuous lapse in my judgment. Anyway, Darth Vader vs. Obito Uchiha had quite the task on its hands in terms of climbing the ranks of Season 10's lineup. So far this season, we've had the greatest thing ever made by human hands, a really awesome 3D fight with a unique tone, a visual treat that debuted a personal friend's researcher work, and a roller coaster ride of the Hawaiian variety. So yeah, at this point I'm just kinda waiting to see what ends up being this season's Predafed equivalent of just being good after a streak of great episodes. I'm glad to report that this is not that though, because oh my god if Vader vs. Obito did not blow me out of the fucking water with how good it was. I knew pretty much from the onset that this episode is to Kian what Chosenborn was to Liam, since we talked about it while on vacation after watching Stitch vs. Rocket. He got to sit in the writer's seat for the first time with this episode, and let me just say something right now. Kian, I'm talking directly to you here. The fact that you asked me to go easy on you when talking about this episode is baffling to me. This episode's script is one of its strongest assets, elevated by Kian's tangible passion for both fighters. I can feel myself getting close to rambling though, so let's pull back and start from the top so I can show you what I mean. Vader's analysis is leaps and bounds better than the one he got against Dr. Doom. That one does have the luxury of using the Imperial March in a time before Death Battle avoided copyright like the plague, but it's balanced out by the overuse of voice clips, so yeah, the new one's automatically better. I'm joking, obviously. There's a lot more that Vader's new analysis has over his old one. It delves into his story much more thoroughly, expertly weaving his descent and his journey to killing Palpatine into his arsenal, abilities, and feats. It's also got a wide coverage of Star Wars media, from the movies to the TV shows to the comics. Hell, they even worked in stuff from Ewoks for his main attack power feat, which is legit litness right there, let me tell you. Obito's analysis is also good. Ben mentioned in the commentary for this episode that they've used a lot of Naruto characters in part because they're all so varied in their abilities, and Obito is no different, meaning his rundown has an identity of its own apart from others like Madara and Sasuke. Between his use of Kamui being far more in-depth than Kakashi's and the infinite Tsukuyomi being worked into his arsenal, there's a good amount of new stuff for Wiz and Boomstick to delve into. We do hear about abilities we've seen many times before, like the Sharingan Eyes and the Truth-Seeking Orbs. But just like Vader, it's all connected by the retelling of Obito's story, meaning that we have not one, but two analyses with amazing pacing in this episode. Kian's script makes listening to both analyses engaging and impactful, an effect that is also attributable to DJ's masterful editing. If I didn't know better and you told me after my first watch that he did all of this in less than a single week's time, I would have said you were a fucking liar. I especially appreciated the animation he made out of manga imagery to explain chakra, since that clip of Sakura explaining it in the anime feels as repetitive as Dragon Ball's universe shockwaves at this point. Also, the royalty-free music in this episode is surprisingly effective in capturing the tone of the music from both Star Wars and Naruto. This makes sense, since DJ actively wanted to pick music that matched the style of Naruto for Obito's analysis, which I'd say he greatly succeeded at. Also, we got Randy Cunningham, Phineas and Ferb, GTA mods, and epic rap battles of history in the B-roll footage. We stay winning with DJ's commitment to the bit. It's really a shame more people don't appreciate the work that goes into editing a Death Battle episode. Returning to Kian's script though, I'm glad to say that not only were the analyses engaging and informative, but they were also very funny. Even lines that weren't written to be jokes got a chuckle out of me, with the intentional ones also sticking the landing for the most part. I think my favorite in this aspect was Vader's cutaway scene, where they forego a deliberate punchline in favor of breaking down Vader's suit problems. It reminded me a lot of Season 1, especially the earlier episodes where Wiz and Boomstick's dynamic was just two guys excitedly talking about cool stuff. Also, while Obito's cutaway wasn't wowing me at first, we did get Mecha Goose Howard by the end, so it's instantly perfect. If I was to compare this episode's analysis portion to Stitch vs. Rocket's, I'd say I still slightly prefer the latter for the entertainment factor, but in terms of the educational factor, Vader vs. Obito has the best analyses of the season and it's not even a contest. Even if it's not my personal favorite, I can acknowledge that it's the most well-made out of Season 10's current lineup. And on a similar note, let's turn our focus to the animation, because I have some shit to say in regards to this one, so buckle up. I first want to talk about the vocal performances for Vader and Obito in the fight, because they're incredible. Jason Marnocha reprises his role as Vader, having voiced him in the Vader vs. Magneto DBX, and he sounds impeccable as the Sith Lord. He gets a lot more moments to shine in this fight, adding an emotional core to Vader that there wasn't room for in his DBX. This performance adds so much to how well this fight conveys Vader's sheer presence, but we'll get more into that in a bit. As for Obito, I was surprised to learn that he's voiced by Nicholas Andrew Louis, who I guess is a Swiss Army knife when it comes to voicing Naruto characters. He really gets to show off his range in this fight with Obito's many different voices, with my favorite being Jinchuriki Obito's deranged zeal. He doesn't quite have the commanding presence of Marnocha's Vader, but the more human edge to his performance adds to the emotional core of the fight, which I'll get to in due time. We open on a beach at dusk, where Obito's contemplation is interrupted by Vader descending on top of his personal TIE fighter. It's an entrance that logistically makes less sense the more you think about it, but I do like the implication that Vader arrived on the Naruto planet, sensed Obito, got on top of his ship, then flew over with the Force for the sake of an intimidating entrance. It's quite funny, even a bit silly if you will. We get a cool exchange about Vader coming to take Obito's powers, presumably meaning the Sharingan and Rinnegan eyes. It's short and simple, and it leads us right into the first bit of action where Vader literally hand-waves Obito's melee strikes with the Force. This is the earliest example of how well this animation portrays Vader's sheer presence, from his deliberate movements to his constant breathing to even his steps having more impact than most of the hits in Hulk vs. Broly. His intimidation factor is dialed up to 11 for this fight, and I am here for it. Vader then stabs Obito with his lightsaber and gets to drop his all too easy line. I really enjoyed how some of Vader's famous quotes were worked into the dialogue. Using them sparingly definitely fits him better than the prequel meme fest that Obi-Wan's lines were. The following scene where Obito phases through the stab and into the ground is great. It helps establish Obito as more than capable of matching Vader's presence, especially with how well his line here sells his confidence. We see more of that after his Gunbai fan gets lightsabered pretty easily, only for him to hardly break a sweat when allowing it to pass through him on its return arc. But Vader's not one to be outdone, and him slowly marching out of the dust cloud with his breathing and footsteps accentuating his approach perfectly captures the feeling of his first appearance in A New Hope. That's a small detail I want to highlight about this fight, especially in comparison to Vader's last fights on the channel. His iconic breathing is actually used to full effect here, growing more rapid after exertion and not being played beneath his voice lines. It was barely used against Dr. Doom, and it's on a constant loop even when he's talking against Magneto. So to hear it used with care in this animation was another way that the team's passion bled through. Anyway, we get some more great scenes as Vader pushes Obito away, deflects the obligatory Naruto kunai with some nice sound effects, and seems to falter against Obito's fire jutsu only for him to use it as an opportunity to pull him in and shatter his mask. This leads us to the first use of the genjutsu in the fight. Obito makes Vader see Padme under the mask, and while his reaction is subdued, you can tell he's taken aback by this. Obito capitalizes on this moment of weakness and casts Kamui behind Vader, trying to suck him into the pocket dimension. But he's made a critical error in weaponizing Padme against Vader, a mistake he pays dearly for when Vader powers through the Kamui and force crushes the Sharingan eye. Everything about this scene is just fantastic, from the vocal performances to the sound design, and it certainly won't be the last time I'll be praising a genjutsu scene in this episode, I can promise you that. The following moment of Obito rushing Vader makes for a cool shot of Vader's hate-filled eye through the crack in his helmet, and his retaliatory lightsaber stab leads to one of my favorite scenes in the fight. Vader and Obito's powers clash before blowing them away from each other, exposing one of Vader's robot prosthetics, and man, just listen to what happens next.
You've lost your humanity as well.
On the path of the dark side, it is inevitable.
I mean, come on! What can I even say about a scene like this? Every single thing about it works, and it's a great character moment for the both of them that gets built upon later in the fight. Vader no-selling the tailed beast bomb is honestly just as incredible, being a great way to show that both sides are basically dead even in the power category. And the zoomed out shot of Vader initially blocking the blast is honestly wallpaper material. The music adopting a Duel of the Fates styled choir for this moment heightens the tension, which is something That's No Moon is generally quite good at in this animation. It really fits a dramatic clash between tragic villains. Brandon killed it with his second score this season. After the tailed beast bomb is compressed and detonated, the god tree suddenly shoots toward the sky, indicating that Obito has attained his Jinchuriki form before we even see it. The actual reveal is even better though, since Obito's line really sounds to me like he's finally giving it his all now. This is followed by some breathtaking melee combat between Vader's lightsaber and Obito's staff, with the camera constantly circling the two to add to the dynamic feel of the choreography. Then Obito flies around the god tree and assails Vader with the truth-seeking orbs, managing to slip one past his defenses and taking out his left hand. This is another good showing of one of Obito's most critical advantages in this fight, and it makes for a cool scene as well, with this follow-up attack of destroying most of Vader's helmet leading to this dope as hell shot of Vader's hateful gaze right after. The following force pushing of Obito into the base of the god tree feels really impactful, and Vader lifting his TIE fighter out of the ground to launch a volley of blaster shots into Obito is a super inventive use of Star Wars tech we haven't seen before on Death Battle. I feel like this moment doesn't get enough credit, it's genuinely cool as fuck. But of course, it can't even hold a candle to this fight's crowning jewel, the ending. Vader pulls Obito back in and tries to choke the life out of him, conveying how angry he is with his last line of the battle. But Obito's not threatened, and we see why immediately after. The god tree has bloomed and cast the infinite Tsukuyomi upon the moon, and the symbol of the Genjutsu is cast upon Vader's eye, pulling him into an illusion. This isn't like the last Genjutsu, however. No longer is he the tortured, barely sustained remains of his former self. No, he's Anakin Skywalker once again, standing before Padme, seemingly brought back from the dead in an otherwise vacant hall. Remember when I said that Kian's script is one of the best parts of this entire episode? This right here is the perfect example of what I mean. The look on Anakin's face is so beautifully conflicted as he hesitates on whether or not he should reach out to Padme. I read his expression as being partly conflicted on whether or not what he's seeing is real, but also whether or not he has the right to touch her again after what Palpatine made him think he did to her. Ultimately though, he does reach out and cusp her cheek, which is the exact moment where he lost the fight. Much like how Obi-Wan could see through Kakashi's use of the Genjutsu, I believe Vader could tell that he was inside of an illusion, a fake world made of his own wishes. But it was in that moment, that warm, familiar feeling of his wife's skin, that he chose to accept that false reality, if only to stay with her for however long the Genjutsu would allow. This adds another layer of beauty to this fight's finale. From my very basic understanding of the Tsukuyomi Genjutsu, time in the dream it traps people in passes much faster than it does in reality. This means that, in the few seconds it took for Obito to end the fight, Vader got to live out a long, fulfilling life as Anakin alongside Padme, free from all the pain and destruction that his turn to the dark side had brought to his life. And as Obito forms the sword of Nunoboko and brings it down on Vader's head, we briefly see that his once red eyes have returned to Anakin's natural blue color, indicating that Obito was able to bring Anakin's heart back to the light one last time. Also, Obito's final words to Vader sell how deeply emotional this scene is to him. From the first time he saw Vader's robotic leg, he saw himself in the Sith Lord, and this is his gift to his foe in return for a hard-fought battle, a swift end to his life of misery, wishing him peace in whatever comes next. I've seen some people call this a mercy kill, but this is more like a pity kill in my opinion, which makes it even more emotional to me. All in all, this has quickly risen to be one of my favorite endings to a death battle in the show's history. It makes me annoyed that so few people seem to be giving this fight its due justice just because of the result, whether they're upset Vader lost or overly happy Obito won. I know Death Battle's not a show too many people tune into for the artistry, but I'm not afraid to call it what it is. This shit is art, and I treasure it when the Death Battle team gives us beautiful moments like this. It elevates those rare episodes beyond just simple battles, and Vader Obito might just be my new favorite out of all of them. Anyway, that's all I have to say for the fight for this episode. It's a beautiful, emotional, borderline perfect way for Devil Artemis to send off Source Filmmaker before transitioning to Blender. Literally the only thing I can say as a negative for this fight is that Obito's sleeve just kind of disappears between shots when he changes models from masked to unmasked. Because everything else this fight does right, it does so exceptionally well. Everyone who worked on this should be extremely proud of themselves, because in my eyes, Obi-Wan vs. Kakashi set a high bar, and this cleared it with ease. I don't have much to say on this episode's verdict, mainly since I'm nowhere near educated enough on Star Wars or Naruto to argue over any of the points they make. Besides, I don't usually fuss over the verdict unless it's actively contradictory to their own logic. In this case, I can buy Obito's superior hacks beating out Vader in the end, especially with his slight edge in attack power. Anyway, I was very excited to see what was coming next after this episode. This season has been great at delivering matches that are either exciting on their own or at least had the potential for an interesting battle. And the next time is Phoenix vs. Raven, a matchup that does not strike me as fulfilling either of those qualities. I'm looking forward to seeing a visually impressive fight, since I've been hearing that that's what we're going to get from this match, but I could not be less interested in the analysis portions for these two. Gene's preview did little to impress me outside of the mythological Phoenix stuff, and Raven is a returning combatant, so I don't know what to expect that we haven't seen before. I don't want to be that guy who writes off an episode just because it's Marvel vs. DC, but let's just say this episode has quite a hill to climb for me to care about it in the long run. To sum up, Vader vs. Obito was basically everything I could have wanted from it as an episode, due in no small part to the passion of everyone who worked on it. You can definitely tell that Devil Artemis and Kian were both actively pushing for this one to happen, and I couldn't be happier that I'm able to share in their love for this match. I gave Stitch vs. Rocket a 10 out of 10 more for my enjoyment of it than my thoughts on its objective quality, but now I have to give this one the same score for that exact reason. It's so nearly flawless in every way that it more than earned that perfect score. A round of applause for the Death Battle team for making this absolute masterpiece. Anyway, with that said and done, check out my reaction video for this episode, where I watched it with the group you're used to seeing on Biff's reactions. After that, check the description for links to other Death Battle reviewers you should give a watch to. See you in the next review, and as always, thank you very much for watching.